Welcome to the 32nd episode of the mini video series, Fridays with Father. It's the Christmas season, and not only do we hear jingle bells everywhere, but we also hear church bells that have been traditionally associated with Christmas for a long time. In the Orthodox Church, however, the use of bells is not only reserved for this, the most wonderful time of the year, but it is rather an integral part of almost every worship service all year round. So, when did we start using bells? What is their purpose in church? And where did the tradition of church bells come from? To find out answers to these questions and more, please join me in this episode of Fridays with Father. Today, it's hard to imagine an Orthodox church without a proper bell tower and the magnificent sound of bells breaking the silence of the day. Most commonly, bells are used to call people together and to pray. However, this was not always the case. In the first centuries, when Christianity was still persecuted, the church did not have an opportunity to openly call their faithful to prayer. It was only after Christianity was proclaimed as the official religion of the Roman Empire in 313 that Christians had the right to make public announcements. Some regions, such as Egypt and Palestine, used horns and other sound-amplifying equipment to communicate to the faithful the time for gathering and prayer. Cymbals, or semantros, and wooden planks with mallets were most commonly used in the Byzantine Empire or the eastern part of the Christian world. Bells, as we know them today, were first used in the Christian churches in Western Europe. Already in the 7th and 8th century, we find that church bells were widely used in France, Italy, Germany, and Spain. Except for a few isolated cases, it was not until the 9th century that bells were in common use in the East. The first official use of bells is at the Great Church of Constantinople. 12 large bells ordered from the West were placed in a bell tower near the newly built cathedral. Bells were introduced in Russia almost simultaneously with the baptism of the Rus in 988 AD. In the 13th and 14th century Serbia, most churches and monasteries built during the Nemanjić dynasty had bell towers in some shape or form, following both Eastern and Western architectural styles. However, after the Ottoman invasion of Constantinople in 1453 and throughout the 600 years of their rule, the use of church bells was strictly prohibited. The Ottoman authorities perceived the bell ringing as blasphemous. To prevent from destruction of the bells, they were taken down and buried into the ground by the faithful, waiting for better times to come. This is, as we know it, a dark period of our history during which not only were church bells silenced, but also every other form of self-expression, such as art, literature, music, etc. The flame of faith, however, was not extinguished despite the most severe measures of the Ottomans. It was not until the beginning of the 19th century that the church bells were heard again throughout the liberated state of Serbia, and bells did not only call people to prayer, but proclaimed liberty and an end to a 600 years of slavery. The 20th century Russia is another sad era for church bells. During the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union severely persecuted Orthodox Christians. Thousands of bells were destroyed, melted and transformed into weapons or various items, or sold for a profit in the West. After the fall of the Iron Curtain, the production of bells resumed, and today they are used across Russia more than anywhere else in the world. In pre-revolutionary Moscow, for example, more than 1,600 bells rang simultaneously, proclaiming the joyous news of Christ's resurrection. The largest bell cast in Russia is the Tsar's bell, which stands at the base of a bell tower in Kremlin. The bell weighs an amazing 288,000 pounds, but was never used because it cracked in a fire when the scaffolding used to hang the bell burned. To this day, bells are not only used to announce the time for prayerful gatherings, but also to express joy of the church and mark the important moments in the life of a community. We ring bells at baptisms, weddings, funerals, etc. We also use them to announce other important events, such as the arrival or departure of an important person, hierarch, or a civil ruler. Historically, church bells were used to warn about an upcoming emergency, invasion, or a natural disaster. In some areas, church bells also tell time, ringing at noon or at multiple times of the day. There are different bells and miscellaneous patterns for various church occasions. Some bell towers are more elaborate than others, but today they all serve the same purpose. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fridays with Father and learned something new about church bells. The next time you hear either jingle bells or church bells, remind yourself of this bell story and know that simply hearing church bells cannot be taken for granted. In the description of this video, I will post links to some of the most beautiful recordings of church bells and SAMTIANs throughout the Orthodox world. If you liked this episode of Fridays with Father, please subscribe to our St. Elijah YouTube channel and click the notification button, a little bell next to it, so that you can get reminders every time the new video gets posted to our channel. See, the bells are everywhere. Thanks for watching, and God bless you.